Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's career session hosted by Capanova. My name is Denise Han. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Before we start, I'd like to thank Capanova for hosting our Gen Z career series. Tonight is our fifth event for this year. Capanova is a nonprofit organization that serves the community since 2020. Our mission is to unite, empower, and advance Chinese American and the broader community. Tonight's session, we will focus on computer science and software engineering. We're thrilled and honored to have two very distinguished software engineers, Chris New from Google and Eric Ling from Meta. They will share their educational journeys and also professional experience with our audience. Each speaker has taken a unique path in this field, and they will share insights and advice that can help you shape your own career journey. Tonight, we have two moderators, Sunny Luo and Matthew Zhang. Sunny is a ninth grader at Veritas College Academy. Outside her busy school days, she loves playing flute and piano. She also does martial arts. Matthew grew up in Great Falls, Virginia, and attended Langley High School in McLean. He completed his undergrad study and is currently a master's student in Virginia Tech. He's now doing research in artificial intelligence, and both of them are excited to foster a great discussion with our speaker tonight. Well, without further ado, let's get started. Matthew, would you please introduce our speakers?
Yeah, absolutely. Glad everyone can be here tonight. Hope we're gonna have a great discussion. First of all, I think it'd just be great if each of our speakers could take a little time to share a little bit about yourself. We'd love to hear a little about where you grew up, your career now, hobbies, and a few fun facts and how you got introduced to computer science.
Sure, I can start. Hey, I'm Chris. I'm actually from Nova. I don't know how many panelists you usually have that aren't from Nova, but I grew up in Herndon until I eventually moved across the country to attend UC Berkeley in 2017. And after that, I graduated in December of 2019, just before the pandemic. And I started working full time at Amazon a few months later, right at the peak of COVID. And after about 2.5 years, I eventually made the switch to Google, and I've been working there since. For hobbies, uh, I spend a lot of time snowboarding in the winters, and I like to surf in the summers. I'm really lucky to live in SF since we have access to both of those. Might not be the greatest, but it's nice to have access to both. Super lucky to be living here. And yeah, could you remind me what else was part of the question?
Yeah, no problem. Just what got you into computer science?
Oh yeah, sure. So I have like a funny story that was like probably the very first time I had encountered computer science after not really knowing what it was. Neither of my parents are really in computer science, so I didn't really have much exposure to it. But my first encounter was in middle school. I attended some academic summer camp at UVA, and we would be assigned to classes that we would take during the day. And one of my classes that I was randomly assigned into was like an intro to coding course. And I guess it had to have been really simplified because I think I was maybe like 12 or 13 at the time. Um, so yeah, I took like a really simplified coding course, and I just remember bringing back home after the summer camp a bunch of coding books that I earned from the teacher for being a top student. But really, I think that just meant I was probably the only one who was like actually taking the class somewhat seriously because it was a summer class. So yeah, I never ended up touching those books, but I think the validation from that teacher gave me that ego boost and helped me start my uh, career in computer science.
That's a
Yeah.
cute, cool story to hear. Yeah, Eric, I'd love to hear a little bit more about you.
Sure. Hey y'all. My name's Eric. I am a software engineer at Meta. I also grew up in Herndon, Virginia. So Fairfax County represent. Yeah, born and raised. I went to, elementary school at like, I don't know how many are from the area, but I went to Flores and Oak Hill, Rachel Carson for middle school, and then I went to TJ for high school. After graduating, I went to Cornell University in upstate New York. Graduated in 2017 and moved to New York City to start working at Meta. And last year, my girlfriend and I moved to the Chicago area. So now I work remotely slash hybrid. In terms of hobbies, I enjoy video games. I also do longboarding, so I guess the land equivalent of, or the street equivalent of what Chris likes to do. Also like dabbling in music production and arts. I grew up playing piano and clarinet, and I think like after leaving school, it was a little bit harder to like find opportunities or make opportunities to like participate. I think like being in an orchestra or like being in an ensemble as an adult in the real world it's a little bit harder to like find those niches. So I found that like music production is a really fun way to sort of like keep some of those skills applied. There's a lot of fun things you can do in music production from like sampling, synths, sound design, like composition, writing, or even just focusing on the more technical aspects. So I feel like that's a really interesting field to play around in. A fun Nova fact for myself, I was in a ballet in the Kennedy Center. I don't dance, I've never done ballet, but there was a ballet showing when I was really young called The Last Emperors about the last Qing dynasty emperor, Puyi. And I played the baby version of the emperor. I was 4 years old, basically went on the stage, looked up into the spotlight and like turned in a circle, and then the lights went out and then somebody had to carry me off of the stage. So yeah, in terms of how I was introduced to computer science, honestly, like a little bit by accident. I think like when I was a kid, growing up, it was kind of the era where like you kind of like still play outside as a kid a little bit, but like there's like sometimes computers in the house. And so I think um, I just always had like kind of an interest for like playing like video games and exploring the internet. Like YouTube was starting to be like a big thing, like watching videos and that sort of thing. So when I went to high school, one of the like required classes that you have to take before you graduate was just introduction to computer science. And I think I saw computer in the name, and I was like, that sounds pretty interesting. Let me take it. Didn't really make a connection as to like what exactly it was that we were doing. I think it was a lot of the curriculum was developed as a standard for the county, and a lot of it was just like controlling this little robot named like FCPS Carol, and you kind of just make it move forward and backwards and like turn, and eventually you lead up to like trying to get it to navigate out of a maze that's defined for you. So you learn like object-oriented programming and like imperative programming and that sort of thing. I was like, this is fun. Like, let me just keep doing this. I don't really know where it's gonna go, but it's interesting enough. So I kind of just kept taking the courses that were offered, and I think we were really lucky at that high school. Like they had multiple like post AP level classes within the computer science discipline. So after intro AP computer science, there's also like basics of AI and also like parallel computing, which later, having gone through similar material in college, like it was really, really comprehensive in high school. So I think we were really lucky to be able to have that. In terms of career, I did one or two internships in college and then joined Meta full time. I spent the first couple of years working on Instagram, specifically on the stories product back in like the 2017, 2020 era. I think right after Snapchat stories came out, Instagram made their own version of it, made it really popular. So it was really cool working on a product team that sort of helped launch that and continue to ride the successful momentum from there. And then in 2020, I switched over to the Reality Labs division of Meta, which focuses on a lot of the like futuristic technologies. So I work on wearable devices, glasses, smartwatches, things like that. So yeah, happy to share more about like specifically what I do now, but that's how I was introduced to computer science.
Okay, I know both of you guys kind of mentioned it before, like in the first question, but did you always know that you want to pursue in computer science or do job around it, or did you explore other career options before you decide?
Yeah, I can take this first. I think I did talk a little bit about this. My first exposure was obviously really early in middle school. I think I was incredibly lucky to have that opportunity and have it be something that I took enough interest in it to feel like confident enough that it was something I wanted to pursue. Um, I think realistically, like middle schoolers are not really thinking about their career like at that age. I don't think I was, but like Eric said, it was something that I enjoyed, and I saw like I also went to TJ, and I was really lucky to like have access to these courses and like the existence of a computer science program because all I knew was that I like enjoyed doing these things, and when you find something at school that you enjoy, like you tend to prefer that over something like you don't enjoy, like history. Um, that's just my preference, though. No hate to history enjoyers. But yeah, I don't think I would have been able to like pursue the career as strongly as I did without like the resources that TJ gave me. So really lucky for that. But yeah, eventually, like I think as I matured, I realized, computer science was like a career that I could get into, and I had like a pretty decent background for it. And another plus was that it's a pretty lucrative career path. So I was like kind of pretty set on like going to college for computer science. So in my particular like path, I didn't really pursue any other career options. But I do want to say that there's no like sort of set career trajectory that anyone really needs to follow in order to break into like software engineering. Um, I've had plenty of like friends and coworkers who like start off pursuing one thing. Like it doesn't even have to be as early as like high school. But like I have friends who went to college for like English or med school and eventually end up in a tech job. So yeah, I was definitely very lucky. But I have people in the same place I am who didn't start that early too. But yeah, that's kind of my background.
Cool. Yeah, thanks, Chris. I think for me, it took me a little bit longer to realize that this is what I wanted to do. I think even for many that I know in the industry, it's an ongoing question, right? Like I think the industry moves quickly. I know you guys have questions about like how to like keep up, keep pace, and maintain work-life balance and those sort of things. But I would say for me personally, I was not sure until like maybe the latter half of college. So when I was picking universities, I was kind of in between like Cornell, which is sort of, at least my impression was, and Carnegie Mellon, which I is a pretty well-known like engineering and computer science school. And I'd been set on Carnegie Mellon for some time, but ultimately decided to go to Cornell because I wanted that more exposure to like other types of industries and majors and departments and types of people. It was also like a much bigger school. And so I think I went in, knowing I wanted to do some kind of engineering, but more so that I wanted to like solve problems in some way. And I think like I was kind of torn between the engineering side of solving problems and the more like the business and consulting side of problem solving. So I think in the first couple of years, I tried to, it wasn't like a half-half balance. Like all of my coursework was still in engineering and I was still like kind of moving myself academically down the computer science track. But I took some time to explore like doing business classes and also joining some of the consulting clubs that we had on campus. Those clubs were basically set to like take on local clients for pro bono work. I think even the more really significantly like serious consulting clubs would do like actual consulting work for larger corporations in like the New York area. But I joined one of those clubs and we took cases from like real businesses and nonprofits around the area that were trying to do like open like a new branch in a new town or like decide whether they wanted to invest in a particular initiative. Or we had a nonprofit contact us about like, hey, can you help do some like field research for like green energy and like solar panels in the community and stuff like that. So I was really trying to explore like what this like problem solving, like how would you actually apply that in a couple of different areas. I think ultimately I kept going down the computer science route, but I think my lesson was like, it's good to take time and explore as well if you're not totally sure. I think ultimately I decided not to go further down the business consulting route. I think one, because uh, a lot of the consulting was a little too much talking for me and not enough doing. I think a lot of like those in the industry will know that like a lot of what you make is like recommendations and you do a lot of analysis that is helpful. But in the end, you're not usually the one like implementing the change. And I think software engineering is really powerful because at least at a lot of like the parts of the tech industry, you're the ones that are empowered to like be making a lot of really impactful changes. So yeah, I would say that um, trying a couple of different things was really helpful for me to know that I wanted to do this more.
Going off that, I know you said that you didn't, you obviously didn't end up going down the consulting route, but exploring those different options and trying that, do you think that you gained skills from that transferred well to your career now? Like, were there things that you learned that you feel like even though you're in a different industry that they still had a high or like really good application?
Yeah, I would say for sure. I think it wasn't the only place that this was reinforced, but I think a lot of like uh I don't know if it's the typical stuff like, like firm handshake when you first meet someone, like make a good impression, like eye contact, like all of that stuff. Kind of small. People say it. You might hear it in other places, like when you're like starting to do interviews or um apply for jobs and those sort of things. But I think just having a very different culture of people, I think also it was valuable to be in different circles in campus. I think the like business world, consulting world has a very different set of people and a different set of personalities than like engineering and like computer science and software engineering. So I think having that just breadth of exposure and understanding like what people are looking for in the real world, because ultimately these are all people that end up being in the real world. You'll interact with them. You might even cross paths with them in the future. So I think it's just helpful knowing like how to interact with those different types of people and know like how to get along with other types of people too.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm sure those are all kind of universal no matter what industry that you enter. And asking both of you all, we kind of talked a little bit about where you started with computer science through high school or college. But looking back, is there some advice that you would give your younger self during school or at the start of your career, considering your experience now, that you would have done differently then?
I can go first on this one. So for me, I want to preface by I think it's a hard question for me to answer because uh, in terms of feeling, I at least still feel like I'm pretty early in my career. And I don't know if I'll ever get over that feeling. But hopefully I will. But Yeah, for me, looking back, I think one thing would be to expose myself more to uh, like what traditional software engineering is, rather than some of like the deep technical material that was taught to me in school. Um, I I I entered industry pretty quickly and after graduating high school, because I wasn't in college for very long. I think I graduated in a bit under 3 years. So how I was able to do that was I was basically like a big nerd, and I took a lot of technical classes. And I think in hindsight, I didn't spend as much time focused on like I think there's a software, for example, there's a software engineering class offered at Berkeley. I didn't take that. I heard it was useful, but I I didn't think it would like teach me like the technical material that I thought I needed to know when I became a full-time software engineer. But it turns out, like the name says in the class, it does help with software engineering. So I was really just like grinding a lot of technical material, which I think is good for people who are interested in pursuing like higher levels of education in computer science. There's a lot of cool um, theory and research stuff that you can do there. It definitely goes very, very deep. Um, but if you're planning on entering industry, I think focusing a little, it's easy to like find yourself focusing a little too much on the technical material, but software engineering is also like a skill to have, and it's not exactly the same as what's taught in school. So I definitely had a bit of a jarring like transition from school into my job because of that, and it took me a little bit to adjust.
Yeah, Chris, that's a really interesting point. Like that made me think of like something that, I mean, I've been out of school for a while, so like I think like takes like a little bit of thinking to like remember like what's relevant. But one thing I do remember a lot about is like the school that I went to, Cornell, was um at the time there were a lot of like complaints. Like it was kind of still a reasonably sized feeder school into like the big tech companies, not near Berkeley scale, of course. But I remember a lot of people being kind of dissatisfied with the school's material, like the classwork being a little too like theoretical or research focused and not applied enough. Like we didn't have like a type of software engineering school, and I remember a lot of people, similar feelings to Chris, what you described of like not feeling like they were missing that last like I guess glue layer between like actual computer science and software engineering, because there's a difference between the two, and that's why they're called two different things. So I guess my like look back advice would be like, if you can, and this is really hard, but like try to understand like what your like blind spots are. Like what is your current situation or your group of friends or your classes, like what are they giving you? And also like what are they not? And this obviously helps if you know like what you're trying to aim for. Like if you are trying to aim for a career in software engineering, like coming to like talks like this and hearing about industry perspective and seeing like what you may be missing out on in your current like day to day wherever you are is super valuable. And if you can find a way to like help pad that gap, whether it's like if you are in more of like a theoretical research focused environment and you sort of are lacking the like practical hands-on experience, like there's things you can do about that. And if you feel like you're more on the like practical side and you want to learn more about like theory or data structures or algorithms or whatnot, there's also like plenty of resources to do that. But I think it's helpful to know like where you stand. In terms of like what advice I would give myself, or like what other advice I would give myself, I think for me it's really important to be around people that inspired me and that I wanted to be more like, whether that's literally your friends or not, or if it's people that you partner with in your classes, or just even like people that you respect in like years ahead of you, like what are they doing? Trying to learn from them. I think people say like, I don't know if this is a meme at this point or not, but like you're like the average of the 5 people that you spend the most time with or something like that. So you want to be around people that bring you up or that you aspire or look up to. The other two things I would say, one is, in general, just be ready for like new opportunities. One personal example I have is I was a part of this student group called the Association of Computer Science Undergraduates. When I joined, it was just sort of like they would have like G-body meetings, which is just like you show up and you talk about whatever. And I remember the president at the time was like looking for volunteers to help out with events. So this is the group that coordinated all of the like tech talks and company events on campus. So they just needed like people to like move chairs and move tables and like set up food and stuff like that on campus. So I just offered to like sign up to attend a couple of these. And after a couple of sessions, like people like the leadership started to notice I was showing up. I eventually like ran for election and ended up as the VP. And that was a really good opportunity to just help shape the direction of the club, get in contact with recruiters from a lot of different companies, a lot of really good networking opportunities and all of that stuff. And that only happened because, I just showed up to meetings and someone was like, hey, I need some help here. And so you never know like where a certain door is going to open at a certain time. So half the job I often find is just like showing up and then kind of raising your hand for saying yes.
This is kind of like a follow-up question about the previously what you guys said, but would you guys recommend learning more about the application rather than the theory you learn in school or learn in other courses, you think?
So did you ask if you would recommend it, or what would we recommend? My bad. I didn't really hear the question.
So, how would you guys recommend learning more than just
Hmm.
like when you're actually using stuff more than what you have actually learned in school or other courses that you took?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and it's certainly not easy. I think like being a student, like you're really more exposed to like the technical rather than the practical. Um, and I think you need to have like the awareness that like not everything you do in the future will be like technical or like theoretical. Um, so I guess a really easy one is if your school or college offers a class called software engineering, maybe consider taking it. Don't make the same mistake I did. But other than that, I think like another great way to get exposure to software engineering is um, just like entering the industry. So as a student, you have the opportunity to get internships. That was really like the only exposure I had before getting my full-time job. Most students will have like 2 to 3 to maybe 4 internships before they actually become like a full-time engineer. And I think that's a really great opportunity to learn what it's like and like start to familiarize yourself with how like your full-time job is going to look. So I think I think like taking full advantage or as much advantage of those opportunities as you can is a great way to do that. I had a couple internships and I certainly like did not take full advantage of them. Like interns are not treated exactly the same as full-time engineers. And despite having a mentor, you'll not receive as much guidance as you do in school. So really you have to be proactive and like take that initiative to um, like learn things and uh, like kind of following up on what Eric said, like find those opportunities for yourself so that you can like gain that exposure and experience that will really help you out in the future.
Yeah, totally agreed. I think like one thing I would add to that, so Sun, your question was like balancing like the theoretical learning and like applied learning, right? I think Um, my bias, like since I had a little more of the like theory side of things in school, is that you can always make up for the applied side. I think the most straightforward and best way, to Chris's point, is like if you can do an internship. I think the question then becomes like, okay, well, how do you get an internship in the first place, right? You know, like I feel like the gate sometimes moves earlier and earlier on. Like, okay, to get a full-time job, you need an internship. To get an internship, you need some kind of experience or something. But like, how do you get that experience in the first place? Um, to be honest, like I think uh people might get into like computer science for different reasons, like because they like video games or like technology or like animation or videos or whatever it may be. If you can find that and lean into it, there's a very good way to just like get some practical experience. So like as a super concrete example, like if you want experience and you don't have like a job or something that will pay you for it, like, and you have, but you have an idea for something that you could make like a website or a phone app, it's very accessible these days to just like try it out. And I think trying to like build something uh will teach you a lot more about the application than applying something than going through like a boot camp course or honestly even maybe even a software engineering course. I feel like a software engineering course will teach you like sort of the tools of the trade, like version control and like communication and testing and these sort of things. I don't know. I haven't taken one, but those are a lot of the sort of like glue pieces that help you become a better software engineer. But they're not going to teach you like how to like set up your IDE, like how to pick a language for writing a new app or a website in. These are all things that you can do. There's nothing stopping anyone from doing any of this. You can like you can like buy a web domain and like host a server and deploy a website. There was like a silly app that I worked on when I was in college that basically like I was really into like music guessing game, like and like knowing like when songs were popular and whatnot, like 80s, 90s, 00s, 2010s. So I made an app that it's just a website. It pulls like the Billboard top 100 songs for every year. And then Spotify had an API that lets you like do a 30-second preview of every song. And I just connected those two and made a game where it would play you a clip of a song and you have to guess like which year it was like top 50 in the Billboard charts, right? Super simple, like just paid like $10 for like the hosting for the domain name and like the hosting was free or something. I like piggybacked off like some university thing or something and just set it up and like I could like send my friends like a link to this and be like, hey, what's the highest score you can get? So like these are great ways to get practical experience. It's not the best way to, you're not going to get feedback on your code. You're probably not going to learn like version control and things like that you would in like working for a company. But these are all things to like get you started. And if you have a similar idea for like a phone app, mobile app or whatnot, these are also super relevant skills. And I think the barrier to entry is super low, is my point.
Yeah, I think that's all great advice. Internships really give you exposure that you don't really get in school, and it's a very different environment from the classroom. And like Eric mentioned, it's how you obtain an internship. There are a lot of ways to it, but really, I think projects are a really good way to learn on your own. And I think a really good point that he brought up was that it's really important to do something that you actually enjoy. Don't necessarily just think about like, oh, I'm gonna gain like XYZ skill from this. Do something that you actually like, because then that'll keep yourself motivated as well. So our next question is, towards the beginning of your career, we can say in school or post grad, how did you decide what were some of the fundamental skills or languages or frameworks that you felt that you needed to or that you wanted to get exposure to?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's, at least for me, might be a tough answer because in school, languages weren't really something we could choose. So like classes that were offered were generally offered in whatever language they were like the curriculum was designed to teach. Um, so at least for like classes, the language is essentially like chosen for you. But I think what's important is like, and I know you also asked about like technical skills, so I think I'll get into that later. But for programming languages specifically, um, it's what you end up learning is more of like not like proficiency in a particular language, but proficiency in like just general coding that allows you to pick up virtually any language. So even when I like started working, I didn't really have a choice in what language I could code in. Um, Basically, like for context, in high school and college, I really enjoyed coding in Python because that language is basically English, and I know English. But at Amazon, I was forced to code in Java, and when I shifted to Google, I coded in C++. I code currently in C++. But I didn't really have any issue with that. At least, and even for C++, I never coded using that language before this job. But I really like didn't have too many issues picking that up. For technical skill, now going, I guess, back into technical skills, I think like a lot of this comes from, I guess, what you're interested in. So it's easy to have like hindsight 2020, and like if you know what you're trying to get into, then you can kind of properly select your technical, like what skills you want to pursue in order to like achieve that goal. But that's not always that clear for everyone. But if you have any like remote idea of what kind of career you want to pursue or like what kind of work you want to do, then you can kind of select technical skills that like help you get to that point. If that means like choosing the right classes, or picking up like projects that interest you that work on those skills, then those are all like potential ways you can evolve those kinds of things. Um, but yeah, maybe not the best answer, but at least like that's kind of my experience with it. Just uh, be flexible, like, and accept that you'll have to probably adapt to learning new things um, wherever you go.
Yeah, big plus one to what Chris said. I would say like in terms of, programming languages to focus on, don't. If you can learn if you can learn two languages, you can learn them all. If you go learn one, maybe try picking up the second one. But once you like sort of understood or mastered one, like you can pick up any of them, and languages will come and go, frameworks will come and go. These change like all the time, and especially at these big companies. Chris, I don't know if you know, like very often, like you have to work on some internal only language that like only applies to the company that you work on because it solves this particular like either it's like server side rendering or like reactive framework or like some other very niche application that only matters at a scale that like a Google or a Meta needs to operate at. And so I would say don't tie yourself to any given language. That being said, it is very valuable to try to master at least one or two, like at the beginning of your career. Um, if not just for the sake of like demonstrating your technical capability and for the sake of like passing coding interviews and showing that you understand the concepts that are brought out through the language itself. But beyond that, I would say like when I started working, I was very heavily tied to the idea that I would do web development. I think because my internships were in web development, I thought that's just what software engineering was. And I joined, and my mentor at the time was like, actually, we really need Android engineers. Like, and I was super reluctant at the time because I was like, oh, Android, that's just like phone stuff. Like, you don't like, web is so much more powerful. There's so much more you can do. Like phones are just phones. You like watch YouTube and play Angry Birds on it, and that, like that's it. Who cares, right? But I decided to like he told me he was like, no, like keep an open mind. Like you never know what like there's a lot of depth to Android. Like he didn't know because he wasn't an Android developer either, but he was like, oh, just like keep an open mind. There's a lot to do with it. And so I picked up Android development and you know, one thing led to another. Like obviously I learned that Android is much more than just like little apps on a phone. There's a lot of complexity at this point. Like these are people's personal computers that like live in their purse in their pocket and you carry your phone around with you almost 24/7. There's a lot of capabilities just on the phones themselves. But what I didn't realize at the time was that Android was not just about apps on a phone, it's an entire like operating system built on top of Linux. And because it's open source, it's often the operating system of choice for any like other devices as well. So like if you've ever been on like an airplane and like you got the touchscreen tablet, um, like that's probably an Android device. If you've like ever use one of those like square like leave your tip here and like it somehow you put enter your phone number or you swipe your credit card and it magically knows that it's you and you get an email. Like that's probably an Android device. Even like a lot of like smartwatches, and even in fact our Ray-Ban Meta like smart sunglasses that I work on, these are all Android devices. So I think like if I had said no to this opportunity like earlier, I would have like close that door. Maybe not permanently, but I would have like not been opening myself up to a lot of other opportunities down the road. So I would say like definitely to echo Chris's point, like stay flexible. Like languages don't matter. You can learn one, you can learn any of them. It's more important that you focus on like being able to like learn quickly, try different types of projects and stay flexible. I think often when you interview for these big tech companies, they will say things like, unless you're interviewing for a specialist role, they tend to look for whether your problem solving skills are well developed. Um, and the way you express that is often through like a series of technical interviews. Usually it will be like your coding interview where you solve like an algorithm leak code style problem. And then usually some other sort of like design oriented problem where you design like a system. So I think yeah, just to echo that, like being able to learn quickly and take on different types of projects to get more exposure. One other general tip I would say is like a lot of times when you are working with software to any degree, there's sort of like boundaries that you hit that it's very easy to take for granted. For example, if you're like writing a program and you like hit compile, like you just hit compile and you expect it to compile. You don't actually think that much about like what actually goes on when you're hitting compile, what it actually takes to like turn your written code into like an executable that runs on like a machine that's powered by zeros and ones. And same with like, you know, if you're writing an app and you like make a network request, you just like call a function and you like expect to get something back like at a certain point. But I find that it's really helpful to like try and challenge these like walls once in a while and try to understand like any black box that you hit or you encounter or you work with, like try to understand it like at least one level deeper. So like when you're hitting compile, like what is your compile target? Like what are your compiler options? How does it actually work under the hood? Or if you make a network request, like what type of network request is it? Like where on the server should you expect it? How long should you expect it to take? Like anytime you just sort of in general, like when you hit these boundaries, like try and take like one step further and try to understand it. And that's a really great like way that I've found for making sure that I'm continuing to learn more and grow more.
All right, that was really good. But as some of the audience doesn't really know about much of a computer science, could you explain the difference between subdomains and like the different subdomains and the difference between them?
Sorry, wrong button.
Sorry, could you repeat your question one more time? I didn't quite catch that.
Okay, so like, what are the different subdomains within computer science? Like maybe And what are the differences between?
Okay. So I'll answer this preliminarily, but I think I'll leave a lot for Eric, since my career path has been pretty like I guess one-dimensional is one way to put it, in terms of like what type of, I guess, software engineering I'm doing. And also, if I'm answering your question wrong, feel free to interrupt me. Okay, thanks. But yeah, I think one thing I want to emphasize first is to break into like software engineering, at least at a very like early career level. What matters the most is like just having like a good sense of problem solving, and like being able to like learn quickly and respond to things, just in a fast way, I guess. So let me give it some context. I think when I first started working at Amazon, the work that I did was so I worked in Prime Video, and I worked on kind of like a video ingestion system, where I would basically receive videos that we would hope to put on the website for you to view, and we would essentially process these videos and um, like check for any defects. So an example is like if uh, subtitles said English, but it was displaying Spanish subtitles, and like a huge array of different types of errors that like these videos could get. So that by the time we post these videos on the Prime Video website, like the user isn't really seeing any of those errors. And I don't want to be too misleading because we didn't actually do a lot of the like defect detection, but we more so built a system where that defect detection could be possible. So there's like hundreds or thousands of different types of defects that we want our systems to check for. And like there's a lot of delegation for like different teams to do one particular defect detection, but the team that I was on was for like orchestrating this entire system so that we could seamlessly do like pass these off to different teams and have them send us back like, oh yeah, there's an issue in this video. Please correct it before we upload it to the website. So building that system was like kind of an elementary like, sorry, bad adjective, like a pretty standard like software engineering problem, is that you're given this problem, like we have a bunch of these defect detectors, like subtitles don't match with the audio, or subtitles are in the wrong language, or like the video is like incorrectly showing like weird pixelated things, and how to orchestrate that in a way that like lets us do this at a pretty massive scale. So this is kind of like what software engineering is. So I don't want to derail too much. I feel like I've been talking too much about like not really answering your question, but this is like kind of the basis of how anyone entering like a general software engineering job will the kind of work that they'll do. So at this new job at Google, I work on a completely different problem, but like the skills that I use are very similar. We're essentially like creating a big system, and like making sure that it's scalable and like maintaining it so that like we don't experience too many failures. So this is like kind of one subdomain of computer science is like software engineering. This is like really what most people who enter a job in computer science will work on. And then as you progress in your career, you'll start to explore more and more niche areas. So for example, like Eric works on like web development, or worked on web development and Android development. That's like another area. And it's really kind of just like a combination of like luck, where like where do you get placed when you start working in industry, and like a little bit of your own, proactive, like looking for jobs in certain types of um, like work that will like eventually land you into these niches, um, and like allow you to explore them and like decide whether or not that's something that you want to explore. So yeah, to summarize, like I would say the main thing to worry about is general software engineering, and that will extend to a lot of these different niches. But um, yeah, sorry if that doesn't fully answer your question, but that's at least like my experience with it.
Yeah, I think adding on to what Chris said, I think there's a couple different ways you can slice it. I think software engineering, like one way I would slice it is exactly what Chris said. Like I think what I would add to that is that, and actually maybe just to borrow some framing that we use internally, um, it kind of depends on like what type of problem you're solving and who you're solving it for. I would say like uh, there's the software, and I think the most standard or traditional form of software engineering is typically solving like scaling problems. So you're solving, you're working with like large scale systems and trying to make them better. The other domains that fall into this like category are like when you're building like user facing features, you're solving problems for people. There's folks that work on like tooling. So like if you like working on like compilers or internal tools to help other developers go faster, you're solving for your peers or developers at that point. I think it depends on it. One way to slice it is like who are you solving the problem for? Like whose lives do you want to be improving? Um, the other I would say is like more like by technical domain. So this is like where like web versus Android, distributed systems, iOS. At this point, you could probably throw like VR and augmented reality and stuff into the mix as well, which is more a little bit about like what type of tools and frameworks you would specialize in out of the gate.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear about the different experiences and within this broader field, like what are the skills that really translate across all the different domains. Um, One thing that I'd like to ask is what's some advice that you have for transitioning between different positions or different roles? I know Eric has been at Meta his whole career, but you've been in different roles within the company. And then Chris uh, talked about earlier about how he switched from Amazon to now Google. What are some of the things that you find are similar, and what are some of the things that you have realized are different?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Transitioning between jobs, um, I would say there's a lot of, at least in my experience, I only made one transition so far. So definitely don't speak for like a general, transitioning from job to job kind of experience. But for me, I found that there's a lot of similarities between Amazon and Google. They are obviously both massive, big tech companies. So that's kind of what you would expect. Uh, it would certainly be more different had I gone to maybe like a smaller company or a startup. I know like the environment there is like drastically different. But in terms of technical skills, I would expect it to be um, there at least to be some sort of overlap. So like kind of view my experience at Amazon as like just a really long period of learning what it's like to be a software engineer. So I took a lot of those skills, like basically, um, like Eric talked about, a lot of the scalability things, deploying things. I took a lot of those skills and really kind of just entered Google with like much more confidence in um, like knowing how to operate in these kinds of environments. Um, so I think that was like one big similarity. Um, but it was also there were certain differences that like I was not expecting. Um, so yeah, I think there's like a degree of how much you should carry over from your previous job or your previous position. Like every team is going to be different. Every company is going to be different in some way. So yeah, I would say like try to retain as like many skills as you can from your previous job because there are going to be relevant things from your previous experience. Like that's kind of what experience is, but also maintain that open mind and like don't expect everything to be the same. There were certain things uh, that I never realized were specific to Amazon. There's a lot of internal tooling um, that when I came to Google, I kind of looked for and eventually realized that like I was just searching for nothing because the only like documentation that exists is within like the Amazon internal docs. Um, like I was pretty naive and there were certain things that I thought were like open source or accessible to anyone that turned out to be just like purely an Amazon internal thing. So yeah, and then also learning a lot of the Google internal tools was uh, like there's a bit of a learning curve, but overall, yeah, the transition is just like there are skills that are generalizable, and also just be aware that you still need to be like going. I guess going back to the previous answer is like flexibility is a really great skill to have. Yeah.
Okay. So the next possible question is, what are some of the emerging technologies or trends that you think people who want to break into the field should focus on?
So I think a pretty obvious answer to this one is AI has kind of been taking over our lives, and I think that's what a lot of people here probably want to hear about. Um, Unfortunately, I'm not the person to ask, but so I'll keep my answer short. But I do want to say like going back to kind of a previous answer that I had, um, starting with like standard software engineering, those kinds of skills um, is like a great way to break into the space. And then if you want to explore AI as a niche, that's something you can get into after. Um, but AI is also kind of like it's like more computer science adjacent rather than like a niche. Um, but people like to view them as like a very similar space. Um, but yeah, if you're interested in AI, be good at math. Sorry, it's not really my space to answer that question in, and I really just do general software engineering. So can't really like answer this question super well. But a lot of stuff going on with AI now. And it is relevant for like general software engineering as well. There are systems that need to employ AI. And like you can like solve problems that utilize AI, but not necessarily like work on it. So yeah, just be aware of that.
But do you mind repeating the question one more time?
Yeah, definitely. So what are some emerging technologies or trends that you think the people who want to break into the field should focus on?
Oh yeah, okay, yeah. So AI is all anyone will talk about at this point. I would say like there's a couple aspects to AI. One is like working on AI itself, which I think is still relatively niche. And this is specifically like if you have like a machine learning PhD and you're like training models to be deployed for like different purposes. I think that's still quite niche, and though it's getting more popular, that's not exactly a thing you can just decide to break into because it's very there's a very high barrier to entry. I think the thing that is more relevant for most people is like the applications of AI. And I think there's kind of two layers to this. Like for software engineers, most of this is like you can like write code with like ChatGPT nowadays. And I'm gonna be totally honest, like me and most people I know are doing this. Like this is not something you should like shy away from. I think it's something that you need to learn how to utilize to make yourself more productive and more efficient. And it's a really powerful tool, right? If you like, it's still important to know the fundamentals and know like what the code you're writing is. But if you just need to do something and you can ask like an AI agent to write the code for you or write a function for you, like it's like the same deal with like using calculators to like do derivatives and integrals and multiplication and exponents and stuff like that. It's like you need to know how it works fundamentally, but you don't need to sit there and do it out line by line every single time. So I think learning how to like use these tools in your day-to-day is super important. And on the flip side, like interviewing, I think has become kind of a nightmare because of this, because now you can just like take your leak code question and throw it in like a chat GPT or whatnot and spit out the answer. So I think the industry definitely needs to learn to like adapt to this and find other ways to either other ways or continue to assess, technical ability despite these tools being like widely available. And I think the other way is like from a non, coding perspective, like these same tools are also super valuable for lots of applications, just like writing messages, summarizing documents, like planning trips, coordinating things. Like there's a lot of powerful things that I think we're just starting to scratch the surface of with these tools. And there's also a lot of really interesting applications for other industries. I think one thing that computer science has always been really powerful with is like adapting to fit other industries too. So like biomedical research, like pharmaceutical research, 3D modeling, medical devices. Like there's a lot of different applications for computer science outside of just like, I guess, raw software engineering and working with machines and trying to scale them well. And so these are also really interesting opportunities to stay in touch with. I can't speak that well to like how to get involved with those much, but keep your eyes peeled.
Yeah, I think AI is definitely the hot trend. I think that's permeated a lot of the general audience as well. You kind of see it becoming more and more involved. So one thing I'd like to ask is, considering both of you are working at big tech companies, how do you manage work-life balance within your job, and especially working at companies like Meta or Google or Amazon?
Yeah, I can take this first. Yeah, work-life balance, it's tricky. The first thing I will say is it depends on what part of your company you're in. I think the companies are so big now that not everyone is going to have the exact same experience working at the exact same company. So there definitely will be parts of the company with worse inherent work-life balance, and there will be parts that are better. And this can be down to like your VP, your director, how they like the expectations they set for their employees, or just the pace of the releases that you guys go through. So expect some variability. I think I'm lucky that like I haven't really experienced like really bad work-life balance, like truly terrible work-life balance. But I would say like some general tips, like as your new grad, if you do have the opportunity to work at like one of these big tech firms, take advantage of like whatever benefits they do offer you, or do this in general for whatever company. Like if they like cater lunch to the office or they have lunch in the office, like eat that or like dinner, like eat that. If there's like a laundry or grocery benefit or whatnot, like use these things. Which like sounds kind of obvious, but I think like it really does it helps you get time back, but it's also a slippery slope, right? Because like a lot of these things are offered for a reason. It like helps keep you in the office longer. It like can sometimes make you learn to grow attached to these types of things that are like not all that meaningful in the long run. Like people are like, oh, I don't want to like work for a different company because I won't have like dinner served anymore. Like that doesn't really matter in the long run, but it is a nice perk to have like while you have it. I think the other things to set are a little bit later on in careers to like make sure you set expectations early on. I think as you get more and more senior and responsible for your projects, a lot of what you'll be asked for is like estimating timelines and how long it'll take to do something. And there's very much like an art to doing this in a way that protects yourself and your team. The art of it is to like overestimate, under promise and over deliver. So set your estimates like way higher than they need to be. Give yourself buffer, and then over deliver on those estimates. And another part of that I think is just learning to delegate well, like as you sort of grow in your career and learn to like lead others through projects or like even lead a team, learning to delegate properly can also knowing when to give others the responsibility and to let go of the reins a little bit is a really important skill from leveraging your time and making yourself and scaling yourself better too. And these all sort of add up to like better work-life balance.
Yeah, that was a really great answer. Thanks, Eric. To add on to that, I do want to say, so I'm definitely not at the point where I'm like, you know, like managing a huge number of people and like doing all these things. So as someone kind of from closer to like the other side where people are managing me, one important thing is that your manager should respect your time. And if your manager's not doing that, then they're probably not a good manager. There's a lot of horror stories out there about these big companies overworking their employees, forcing them to work long hours and like not giving them much, time off. But I think those are they I don't want to say definitely because I don't personally know about any of these cases, but they possibly exist. But in most cases, they're not as bad as it sounds. And a lot of times it's because like the people who you work for are like, people too. They like have their own time as well. So they should understand that you should be allowed to have your your time and a good work-life balance too. So it's kind of hard sometimes. So like the reason I kind of believe that cases like this do exist is because this type of job is not often like a traditional job where kind of you clock in at the same time every day and you have like 9 hours of work, 8 or 9 hours of work to do, and then you clock out. There are definitely like ebbs and flows of how much work you'll be doing on a day-to-day basis, just based on like various factors. So, like for example, I don't actually. I don't want to set like a bad example for people, but this past week we've had kind of like a pretty bad incident where one of our customers are like kind of panicking because of the upcoming election. And basically our clients are like big companies and we're security products. So, security is like of the utmost importance with like the upcoming election. So we're kind of working like really late nights and like trying to resolve all of these issues before a certain time so that when the election comes, there aren't any security flaws or like vulnerabilities or things like that. So I've definitely been working a lot more this week, but since my manager is human, he has given me like the chance to take a couple days off as like a trade for working like these extra hours. but at the same time, in general, there are weeks where I don't tell my manager, but there are weeks where I've worked like very few hours, just because like the work is light at that time. So it kind of varies from time to time, but in general, like you can set your own boundaries and your manager will in general respect that. I totally did not have to work late this past week, but I had just, you know, volunteered to because I like care about the product that we're working on. And there are plenty of team members who had like prior commitments and like they didn't commit to like working extra in order to solve this problem. So it's not something that like you're forced to do. So yeah, it's like totally okay to set boundaries. I think is like a great way to maintain that work-life balance. And a lot of, and then to add on to that, a lot of things that I see like new grads or like early career folks, like people my age as well, fall into is like kind of feeling a pressure to work extra to get something done. Um, like no one's asking you to do that. And it's really easy to like fall into that because a lot of expectations at these jobs are set based on how much you can accomplish. So people feel the need to work extra hours to make it look like they've accomplished more. Um, but really, like no one's asking you to do that. If you want to, like feel free to, but it's like your own decision. So if you want to have a good work-life balance, you're free to like make that choice for yourself, essentially. And in general, your manager should respect that. And if they don't, then you should probably leave that team.
Yeah, I wanted to add two things to what Chris said because they were really good points. One, I think your work-life balance doesn't exist in a vacuum. Like if you live on a team, if you work on a team and everyone's up at like 9 p.m. still pinging each other, asking for like questions or reviews or whatnot, like obviously that's a like you're gonna feel like that's the default of what you should be doing. And similarly, if on the flip side, like if your whole team like signs off at 5, no one's in the office anymore, no one says anything, like you're gonna feel a lot more free to like get out of there, right? So it's not just like it's not always just about like one person or one isolated example. These things tend to like happen in clusters. And the other thing I would add to Chris's point about like you know, setting boundaries and whether you work harder or not, I think especially at these companies with like predefined career paths, like doing more is not usually the path to a promotion. So like I think of this as like if you're like a if you're like working at a store and you're like if you're like doing checkout, right? And you're like bagging groceries and stuff like that, like you don't get promoted to being a manager by bagging hundreds and thousands of bags per hour, right? You get promoted to manager by like showing signs that you're operating at a higher level, not just by doing more of like the same thing. So I think that's something to keep in mind. Like I think a lot of people can tend to mistake like just getting more done as like doing a better job or like growing or like deserving of a promotion, when oftentimes it like almost means nothing in that direction. So you want to focus on the things that are making yourself more valuable and making your time more leveraged.
Great. I think that's all great advice that you guys shared. So I think now we'll move into question and answers from the audience. So just feel free to message into the chat anything you want. I think we have some already that were from earlier in the session. And the first question is pretty related to actually what we just talked about, but what does your typical workday look like?
I can talk about this first, as I like briefly touched on it, answering that last question. So like I said, not every workday will look the same for me. So certain days I'll work like less, and certain days I'll work more. But I would say like maybe to best answer your question, like what an average day looks like, would let's see. I think I tend to stick to pretty standard working hours, and that's not necessarily true for all engineers. Um, we're very fortunate to have like this kind of job where it's very remote friendly, and you kind of have the opportunity to like disperse your like say 8 hours however you like throughout the day. So I have teammates who will work like, you know, early in the morning, take a couple of hours off during the day, and then work in the evenings. Um, and that's totally okay. No one really questions it. Um, me in particular, I will stick to like the pretty standard 9 to 5. Um, probably like a little earlier than that in general. But yeah, um, it's really just kind of as a software engineer, our jobs are not very interesting. There's a lot of like just focus time or meetings is kind of really what it boils down to. So you're either in a meeting or you're just writing code or working on something. So yeah, like the only thing that stays consistent, I think, is every morning we have like a 15-minute stand up um, where everyone kind of walks through what they've been working on for the past day and um, like bring up any problems that they've been having, see if it can get resolved by any of their teammates. Um, and then the rest of the day is just either various meetings or just writing code. And anytime there's an issue, uh, I think it's good to reach out to other, like talk to people. So there's like focus time where you write code, but you know, it's not always useful to be like in your own thoughts. Like, so yeah, sometimes I will speak to my coworkers. But yeah, and then kind of like varying uh, amounts of work for different types of days. So this past week, I've kind of been working a lot more. So this kind of week has been more meetings, meeting heavy, and a lot of like programming on a call, just trying to wrap things up quickly, having multiple people like in what we call like a war room. So kind of like everyone is very accessible. Everyone's just like kind of working on a call. Anytime someone needs help, they can just speak up and get help immediately. And those kinds of weeks are a bit longer in terms of the work hours. But yeah, in general, pretty straightforward. Um, just coding or meetings.
Yeah,
Okay,
I think
that's really, oh, sorry.
go ahead. Go ahead. I'll just add like, yeah, I think Chris covered it pretty much. I would say the only thing I would add is uh these blocks of focus time become more important the more meetings you have. So I think being deliberate about like keeping those there is an important factor for being able to stay productive.
Okay, so I just collected one question from for Chris that did you and your team need to be in the office every day or is there any like remote working time?
Yeah, good question. We're obligated to come into office 3 days a week, or two or 3 days a week. This will vary from company to company. I go in every day um, because the commute is easy and I like to not have to cook at this point in life. Um, so yeah, we're allowed to remote work, and I do it sometimes. Um, but yeah.
Another
Okay.
question that we got earlier was for a senior in high school, are there any suggestions you guys have for them to decide if computer science is the right major for college?
This is a tough question since I think it will vary for different people. Um, I think there's like a combination of factors, like A, how much do you like computer science? I think I'll let Eric speak a little more on this since my trajectory was like a little different since I was pretty certain that I liked it. And then, yeah, I mean, I would say it doesn't hurt to try it out. College is very forgiving. If you want to pursue one thing and then change your mind later, um, that's definitely not the end of the world. There's like plenty of people who have done that. Um, so yeah, it doesn't hurt to try it.
Yeah, I would echo that. I think just try it, and I guess maybe the follow-up question would be like, what specifically to try? I mean, I think the easy answer is like just try whatever level class is sensible, like whether that's just the introductory or the intermediate, or if you have any past experience. It may be hard to exactly know if that one class or experience knows that you want to do this for your career. But I think like if you have any sense of it, like I think if you don't hate it, like if you don't hate the concept of like writing code to accomplish something and all the sort of periphery that goes into that, I think that's enough to know that you should it's at least worth continuing. If you're just kind of meh or you like really don't like it, I don't think that's probably a clear sign that it's not for you.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice. I think from my experience, a lot of people when they start out, um, a lot of them don't necessarily know immediately that this is the career or path that they want to do, but there are a good amount of people who realize very quickly that it's not what they want to do. So, um, yeah. And I think there was only one other question that I saw in the chat earlier. Um, I think they were just asking how many leak code questions do you have to do to get an interview or to get through an interview. I think for those who don't know, leak code is like I'd say it's a pretty well known within the software engineering space. It's like a interview question practice site.
So this is my cousin that asked the question. I don't know how serious of a question it is, but I think it's a decent question nonetheless. Um, yeah, I mean, you have a great description of what leak code is. It's really just like interview prep for software engineering interviews. Um, these are like very different from the traditional type of interview, which really just asks for like your work experience and like your soft skills. This is really like testing your problem solving and how it kind of like supposed to be used as an indicator of like how fast will you be able to learn things on the job. And at this point, it's kind of just devolves to memorizing and pattern matching for like a job, but that's not important. Anyways, for how much leak coding, this varies from person to person. Some people will do like hundreds of leak code questions um, for a job where others don't really need to do as much. I would say just, practice some questions until you feel comfortable enough to like answer kind of like a decent number of them. At least like when you get a question, you feel comfortable like go exploring certain paths to like see how to solve it. Obviously, like you can do hundreds and thousands of lead code questions and learn every single pattern and ace your interviews that way. But that's definitely not something you need to do.
Yeah, to add on to that, I think leak code is a necessary evil that somehow we've just accepted in this industry. I think for some tips that I would give for knowing if you're ready or not, when you're doing practice, I think it's easy to just go through the problem and be like, I could figure out how to do this, and then you move to the next problem. Like, take time to deliberately set like an interview scenario, like time box yourself, give yourself like 2 questions, 45 minutes, and actually sit down and try to get a working solution. I think given leak code, you can like you can run your code in the browser right there. I think even in more advanced software will like give you the test cases and show you which ones pass and fail and whatnot. So actually do that and see if you are like able to fit the 2 questions comfortably within that time frame. The other thing I would suggest is I think one suggestion that interviewers will do to make sure someone's not like they actually understand their solution, or like they're you're not just like spitting out whatever ChatGPT gives you. Is like they'll ask you questions, or they'll maybe ask you to modify your solution somewhat to handle like a new condition or a new scenario. And this is just to make sure you understand what code you're writing. So I think it's really important like to do the reps to understand and pattern match, like Chris said, and then really make sure you understand like what every line of code you're writing is actually doing, and be able to defend and describe why it works. Like it's easy to get into a loop where you like just hit compile, it doesn't work, you change something, hit compile again. It's really fast feedback, right? It's great. It's like you just fiddle with something until it like kind of works. But make sure you really understand what is happening.
Yeah. One other question that we got through direct message is the current job market for software engineers, especially for new graduates, worse due to AI or due to the economy or any other factors?
I would say the economy, but it's hard to like, it's hard to say. I think like day to day, we don't tend to like be monitoring the job. I mean, unless we're like looking for a new job, but based on like what I've heard and understood and like read about and watched about, like a lot of it is like related to like, 2010s tech boom, zero interest rates, companies hired like crazy, 2021, 22 layoffs, zero job growth, that sort of thing. So I would not necessarily blame AI for this. I don't know what the conclusion would be to tie this to AI, except for like maybe automating certain job functions array, generally not like software engineering, I would think.
Yeah, I just echo that. We're really not like facing this kind of like this part of like hiring or like this company, like we're not really close to the hiring. So really like the only way we can answer this is like from what we've heard on the news or like through other people. So yeah, I mean, I would attribute it to the economy as well, but can't give you like a definitive answer because um, it's not really like something that I focus on.
Well, thank you. I think that pretty much concludes it right on the dot at 10 o'clock. Really appreciate all the advice, all the insight that both of you have shared with us. I think it's been a really good opportunity to learn more about computer science and the software engineering industry.
Yeah, and thank you, Matthew and Sunny, for facilitating.
For the great questions.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, all of you. Thank you, Eric, and thank you, Chris, for joining us and give us such an insightful sharing. And thank you, Sunny and Matthew, for hosting this session. We actually have come to the end of the session, but as you guys probably know, this is our last career session for 2024. And on the screen, you see Stan New. He is the master behind the whole career series, and we all owe a big thank you to Stan. Stan, thank you so much for pulling the strings and inviting all these like excellent young professionals to share their experience and share their journey with us. And we can't thank you enough. Stan, if there's any like ending quick comments for us before we end this year.
Sure. I want to again thank all the speakers and the moderators here, but also I want to thank all the parents out there, staying that late of the night. So this whole young professional series really is kind of pilot experiment. We got some like requests from the community that want to host some kind of career seminars, and after sort of brainstorming with a group, we figured out actually the best way to having our speaker, those young professionals like those two you sing here, and this is really a great platform we aim to build to kind of facilitate between the young professionals and our young audience, the students you've seen here, like Matthew and Sunny. So this is really a great service to the community. And I think having those young professionals as our guest speakers really have many advantages. You can tell they can easily, so connect with our young audience, and they also can share the experience and more relevant and more updated. As many of you know, the parents are slowly in exiting our career, so a lot of our knowledge has been absolutely outdated. So those young professionals really can bring us the more updated information, and I really appreciate those kind of casual environment, having kind of natural dialogue, and the speakers are willing to kind of peel their skin and share their sort of insight with them. This is great. So the same as a series, I think it's also the other goal is about a community building. We all heard that the CAPA is a great organization being led by our president and many volunteers like Denise and many wonderful people. And currently most of the composition, the members are the parents, and as we know, our community is more than the parents. There's a large component are those young children, and those more like grown-up children who are in the working force and actually building their successful career. So I guess I'm thinking to engage this group makes our community building like more meaningful and more impactful. So this year we kind of test our water. We had 5 series. I think each of those series cover different topic. We hear some very good feedbacks, and next year we haven't decided, and I think we will really want to hear back from the community what kind of topics you like to hear. And so we're gonna do some brainstorming and also outreaching to the community and try to plan for our next sessions. The last thing, I think this is really great teamwork, and pleased to working with Denise and several other hidden heroes. They're not here, they all have busy life. I think this is really a team effort. I think we kind of work together and put together this series, and as I say, this is a pilot experiment, and we will do some kind of after action review and to figure out how we're going to proceed in making a better series. So again, this is our community effort, and I thank everyone, the speakers, the moderators, and everybody else out there in our audience. So with that, we conclude our series, and happy Halloween, and enjoy the rest of the evening. So bye now.
Thank
Chris,
you,
so nice to see
Jen.
you.
Thanks,
Okay.
everyone. Good night.